Hello, I'm Dan Doolan,
I'm Chris Billingham.
and join us as we venture into the unknown and over-analyse the garden wall. It's like
Whoop, whoop.
It's almost like this is some sort of podcast format, almost.
Yeah.
So, just a little sit rep because this has been broken up a lot. We're doing this relatively close to the last one, particularly considering the gap between the one before that and the last one.
Yeah, we're pretty. I think the intention. We've got the next two sessions lined up as well, so we should be fairly. Well, we got no choice. We started releasing them, so
We have to stay on
be
top
doing
of it
all
now,
of
at the very
these
least.
close together.
Yeah, forced to by circumstance. Yeah, that's a thing. So, I mean, should I get straight into explaining the plot of Mad Love?
Give us a little recap, Dan.
Quick recap. I'll try and keep this one short. So, basic premise of Mad Love is we open and we're immediately in the situation. They're at a dinner table in Quincy. Is it Endicott? It's Endicott. Quincy Endicott's home. Yeah. They're pretending to be his nephew because they're looking to steal enough money to get the ferry to Adelaide. They need 2 cents or 2 pennies. And the plan is just to sort of like play along with him, like, and he's all sort of on the verge of either thinks he's mad or is becoming mad. He's not sure. He thinks he's seen a ghost. So while Greg distracts him by going to investigate the ghost, no one seems to really actually care what was going on with the ghost. That allows Beatrice and Wirt to go looking for something to steal of relatively low value, like find some change behind his couch or whatever, because they only need 2 cents, and he's obviously very wealthy. While they're doing that, they get a bit lost, find that the house is actually so large and has been extended so much that it has got onto the property and connected to another large manor, and the ghost he saw was actually the ghost of a lady, his rival tea. He owns a tea industry, business, and she owns the rival tea business. She's called Lady Grey. It's all very funny. We had a laugh. We all had a laugh at Margaret Grey because, of course, if she's a lady, she's Lady Grey, which is a kind of tea. Ha ha ha! British humour, they said, as they laughed at that. And then then Greg. There you go. And then Greg is given a penny from both of them, which gives them their 2 cents, as it were. But he remembers being told that he has no sense, so he throws the cents away as some sort of weird wordplay joke, and they are back where they started. It's the only thing of the episode I've sort of missed there is that there is, during the search of the house, a bit of a heart-to-heart between Beatrice and Wirt, which we will get to later, where that sort of has some tantalising hints as to some of maybe a bit of the backstory. So we'll just get straight to it, Chris. What did we think? How are we feeling about this episode? We liking this one? Not so much.
I'll be honest. I was a little down the middle. I was a little kind of meh. I liked it. It was a fun romp, but I think because I know it's only 10 episodes.
Yeah, you want to get to the meat and potatoes now.
Because of where the last episode ended.
Yep.
I kind of expected more meat, to be honest, than just the Beatrice conversation, which was good and meaty. And like I say, the rest of it was fun, and I really liked John Cleese's character. I liked the resolution to that. I liked the romance. That was cool.
Yep.
You
were historically, for those who don't know, who just listen to this podcast and haven't really listened to our other stuff, Chris loves a romance. Like, romance is like his weakness. You put that in any show, and he gets about 25% more invested, regardless of the quality.
Yeah,
I think that's fair.
Yeah. That's absolutely fair. I mean, there's an element of like, oh, and now we're making out with this, but that's fine. Literally, because it was played for laugh. Like, literally, she's my biggest competitor, and then they just kiss.
It's great. It's really well done.
Yeah. So I enjoyed it all, but I think that's it. I'm looking at it. I'm like, right, 10 episodes. We had this tantalizing woodsman thing at the end. Let's do this, and it kind of, the show went, yeah, we'll get there, don't worry. Here's some entertaining 10 minutes, and that's fine. And it's unfair in a way. If this was 20 episodes long, I'd be like, oh yeah, it was cool, rompy episode, not much to say. But I'm kind of like, oh, we're halfway through, based off of where we finished last week. I thought we were going there a little bit quicker than this episode.
But do you not think, as we established with Steven Universe, sometimes setting up tone or sort of enhancing character means that when the sort of the more sort of key narrative stuff happens, you're more invested. I mean, we've talked at length on our other podcast about how in Steven Universe often people complain about the quote-unquote towny episodes, which are these sort of side romps with various members of the town, not connected to the Gem homeworld mythology stuff. All that stuff, people go like, that's the stuff we want to see. So, it's so frustrating that we spent an episode with Buck and the teenagers or whatever. And we've always defended that and said, look, you need those episodes. They fill out the world. They fill out the characters. They make you care about the town. Therefore, they make you care about the outcome. And do you not think, do you feel that's not as effective here? Do you think like you didn't get enough character stuff from this to make that a valid argument in this case? Or do you think that argument still stands true here? Like, how or are you sort of unsure because you've not seen the whole yet?
It does a bit, but it might all come together with the whole. But most of the character stuff we got was that, as you say, that sort of one scene with Beatrice and Wirt. So, maybe I'll be proven wrong, but a lot of the character stuff was John Cleese's character, which doesn't feel like it's going to turn out to be as relevant. I would love to be wrong on that and hope it does turn out to be relevant. Mm-hmm. And in which case, if it does, then yeah, they did a great job of it. Yeah. But they sort of. I think found it. I suppose it might. It is a bit different because obviously the two houses joined. But when we've had a woodsman, we've had the woodsman in the first episode. We've had monsters and things being too big or too small and size being a bit disproportioned and stuff. And the kind of the eeriness of that. When we've had a school, it's had, animatronic animals. When we've had a bar, it's been full of stereotypes. A rich man's mansion and the rich man's slightly crazy. It felt very normal and very regular. The end resolution resolves that a little bit. But like when this episode started, I was like, this feels like too normal a scenario for them. Like, it didn't feel as quirky as Dancing Pumpkins.
Do you think that's because Ghost as a concept is almost like from our reality? Because people often say they've seen ghosts or whatever. Do you know what I mean? No one.
Maybe, but she wasn't.
No one's doing a documentary on the History Channel saying about how they saw pumpkin people or whatever. So do you think Ghost is almost too pedestrian for this show?
Maybe, but it also turned out to be pumpkin people. So maybe it's also the almost.
Well, the pumpkin people didn't turn out to be pumpkin people, did they? They turned out to be skeletons wearing pumpkin-y flesh. Like there's been a lot of subterfuge in this show. Most of the things that have been perceived to be threatening have turned out not to be. The big monster from the very first episode turned out to be a normal dog that accidentally ate one of the turtles on the elderwood tree. So it's there's a running theme of threat, not threat.
Yeah, but hear what you just said. Skeletons wearing pumpkin heads.
That's what exactly.
And a frog that a dog that ate a frog and turned magical. Like I say, this is none of those things would fit well in a in a murder mystery.
So that's so in that case, then I'm what I said initially. Then was my first guess as to why that didn't quite sit well with you was probably correct. Then is that it was just almost too pedestrian for this show. Like it's just too normal for this show, not as creative as this show has been historically.
Not as maybe in my view, not as in keeping so much with the tone. I mean, what did you think though?
I love this episode personally because I just like the notion of the two houses, combined. I think that's just a funny idea,
and that is very quirky.
Yeah, and I think as well this idea that like it's two rival tea merchants or whatever, and they both happen to own the same land and have like both expanded their tea empires. Because here's the thing: who are they selling tea to? Look, we've been around this world a bit now. We've met a few. We've been to a school. It was a pretty dinky little shack. The woodsman was living in an old mill. Doesn't seem like there's a great market for tea. Well, who are they acquiring all this wealth from? It was almost quirky in that in its normality in a weird way. It felt like it came from our world, and that felt wrong. Do you know what I mean?
In a weird way, it
kind of felt quirky out of maybe on accident, because maybe they didn't make it quirky enough to fit the world, and that then became what was quirky about it. Because I was kind of like, this is almost of our Earth. This is almost of not the unknown, but reality. Like people doing business and collecting vast amounts of wealth while everyone else seems to be living in pretty much squalor. You know, I mean, this is it's a really rustic world, and these two people seem to have amassed these insane fortunes. There was something also intriguing to me as well about the styling. I don't have the exact quote in front of me. Actually, I might do, but as Wirt noted, the homes both had a very different. What's the word? It was French Rococo style was her home, and Endicott had more of a sort of a Georgian thing going on, and. My understanding, and I don't know, I had to do some Googling, but I believe those are two very different periods of history. It's not just that they're separate. I don't believe the Georgian period was around the same time as the French sort of Rococo style, whatever he's referring to. So that to me was interesting as well, the idea that it was like almost like not just two places, but two times meeting. And it's worth noting that it wasn't just the styling of the manor. The only thing I have really this week that passes for trivia is that it also applies to their clothing. They're both dressed in those styles also. There wasn't a lot of trivia on this episode.
I think you're right. It's probably quirkier than it appears.
Yeah, so and I think as well, I must admit I like the characters. I didn't mind.
Yeah,
so I did like Endicott. I like this idea that he thought he was going mad. And that he was worried that being alone in this house for so long and all this loneliness was sort of systemic of, like, that it was sending him mad, and that these sightings of a ghost was systemic of a growing madness. And that weird concern he had for that. Because, obviously, worrying that you're mad probably means you're not mad. You know what I mean? Insane people, truly mentally ill, like really severely, people who are heading towards psychosis don't realize they're heading towards psychosis. So, I found that really interesting. And also as well, I think carrying on with this, with the analogy of the show, this idea that he was it was almost like he was in his own personal hell, to have acquired all this wealth and seemingly have literally nothing to do with it. He just sits in a big house. Great. He's lonely. Like, it almost felt like a personalized hell for him of some sort. I remember feeling strongly like that when I first saw it. I thought that gave me a sense of the world, So yeah, I think there is stuff to take away, but it is more thematic, I think, than actual practical story and character. And I'm noticing that more on this rewatch, actually, of this show, is that a lot of what I got out of it the first time, even if I wasn't able to articulate it in this manner, was actually it's just about the thematics. It's really clever. The way that a lot of this plays out. It's kind of hard to explain.
Do you think that's
what I mean.
In part you getting to watch it that way? Because part of if it sounds like I'm down on this episode, like, just to reiterate, like, one, you've changed my view on how quirky that is, so I think that complaint has been shifted in my mind. But also, if it sounds like I'm down on this episode, a key thing to remember is if I was watching this in one chunk, binge watching it, or even watching it, as it was airing, I'd have just been like, yeah, that was good, and moved on. Like, it's having to pause and over analyze it sometimes adds this weird sense of like, oh, not as enjoyed as much, when actually it is,
because you're itching
finding something to say.
Yeah, because you're itching to get through it. I understand. One other thing as well, I do think that's interesting about the sort of the themes of the show, and this is, I got this from the wiki, so I'm not going to pass this off as my own work, but the central theme of this episode could arguably be described as death, because some elements in the story point to this. For instance, the episode introduces the need for the two pennies to ride the ferry to reach Adelaide. In the Greek myth, a small fee in the form of a coin was needed for Charon the ferryman to take newly departed over river Styx and Archeon. Archeon? I can't remember. Okay, well, we'll pretend I pronounced that correctly. Into the land of the dead. Peacocks as well are actually symbols of immortality and eternal life after death. Endicott also explains that he is crossing into the abyss, never to return.
Yeah, I did notice that line, I must admit. And I was like, my purgatory ears popped up. I was like, Tell me more.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of like thematic stuff to us. I mean, that Greek myth one I found really interesting, actually. That you'd cross the, into how was it described here? Let me see if I can bring that back up. It was into the land of the dead. So you would use it to cross the river to get to the land of the dead, and you'd need a coin to do that, which is exactly what they set up is here. Yeah.
What did you think of the ending? Did it make it feel like a waste of time, or did you appreciate the joke enough to not be too bothered about that?
Yeah, I'm torn on that one. I reckon. Let me watch it again and ask me again. I'll give you a completely different answer because I watched it twice in preparation for this podcast, and my opinion of it changed each viewing. So the first time I thought that was cheap and annoying, and the second time I chuckled at the joke. So like, I guess the answer is somewhere in the middle. Like, I think both viewpoints are actually kind of valid there. It's a bit of a cop out answer, but I do think it rides that line so finely that I think they sometimes when I'm watching it I feel like they just get away with it, and sometimes when I'm watching it I feel a little bit cheated. Never goes massively onto either side, but I think they just about nudge through that one. But because that like part of like the next episode's going to be about getting on the, I guessed at the time the next episode was going to be about getting on this ferry. And like how they were going to do that without money. They set it up pretty clearly. It's clearly the next obstacle in their path. So I kind of thought like, well, that actually adds. If they just had a coin to get on the ferry, I guess that's less of a. Now they're going to have to, I guess, sneak onto it. Was my thought. Like that was kind of what I thought about in probably a very small gap between me watching this episode and watching the next. So let's have a little look then at. Actually, no, let me get your opinion on that. What do you think about the ending? You didn't give your opinion. Do you think that's cheap?
It made me laugh, but a little part of me was just like, oh, God. But like you say, it made me laugh quite a bit, and I was kind of like, well, they're not going to do another episode. I trust them not to do another episode of them trying to get money from him or money from a different source. So
yeah.
It was just that sense of despair, I guess.
I love that. Uncle Endicott pegged me all wrong. I've got no sense at all. It's great.
I love that. It's such a clever way to kind of, even though he's not going mad about the ghost thing, he still thinks they're his nephews.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I never thought about that. That's really true.
He's still a little bit eccentric.
Yeah, that never changes.
That was quite a nice character definition.
I thought John Cleese nailed this character, by the way.
Oh, he was brilliant. Especially the line I really loved, what about you, my equine friend? I thought that was just delivered so well.
Yeah. He kind of, like, he's got such a great voice. I think it's a shame he doesn't do more of this sort of stuff. I think he does do appearances in other bits and bobs. Like, he was in a couple episodes, a handful of episodes of Speechless this year. And he was great in it. And sometimes I just wish he did more stuff like this because he's such
especially
such a talent.
It's weird because he obviously did the alimony tour, which was a tour which he literally did to pay for his divorce. And that's why it was called that, because he needed like a crazy amount of money, like millions and millions. And you got to think, surely like animation is some of the easiest money you can earn as a performer, surely.
Yeah, it probably doesn't even have to get dressed.
Yeah.
Stick a microphone in his house so you could just sort of show up and record a few lines, send them off digitally.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Did you find any elements of this episode spooky, scary?
No, not particularly.
No.
But
I think the pumpkin episode
watching...
is the benchmark for creepiness in this show so far.
Yeah, but also been watching Love, Death and Robots, so it's going to be hard for any animation to look creepy or scary after you've seen that, isn't it?
Some of the episodes, yeah, for sure. Not so much the yogurt one, but the many of the others. Have you seen the yogurt episode yet? By the way.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, it's brilliant. As is the Suits one. I was cheering with joy at the Suits episode.
Isn't that great?
When one character reappears somewhere, and I'm like, oh, like I cheered.
Yeah,
it's fist bumped the air.
If anyone listening to this doesn't know what we're talking about, Netflix released a new series called Love, Death, Robots, or Love, Death and Robots. If you've got a Netflix account, you owe it to yourself to check it out. It's not for children at all. Very much not for children. Repeat that. very, very much not for children, but it is definitely worth watching if you are an adult and enjoy animation, which I suspect a percentage of our audience probably are. So let's get to the
Beatrice of it all.
Well, let's get to the meat, the bit of meat we did get. So, she sort of reveals, sort of accidentally, that she wasn't always a bluebird. She used to be a person, and then work questions her on that. And there's some really great. By the way, this episode does wonders for their sort of relationship for me. Their back and forth feels really natural now. I feel like they've built a really good rapport between those two characters that I really enjoy. I like the way they interact with each other now. They know each other a bit better. It's the sort of conversation you feel like somebody who knows somebody really well would have with that person. So, but Wirt sort of gets her to explain how it is she became a bluebird, and she tells the story. Do you want the exact quote, or do you want me to? I can find the exact quote.
Yeah, find it.
Yeah, why not? He goes, now who's avoiding the question? And she's like, oh, she says, who now is avoiding the question? He goes, you. And she says, fine. So she explains, I threw a rock at a bluebird and it cursed me and my family, and now we're all bluebirds. Happy? Now you go. And he's like, whoa, your whole family? And then he says, is that why you're going to Adelaide's, to fix things? And she says, and this I found this very intriguing, that was the plan, but... And then she sighs and says, yes, that was the plan. Again, was and the but.
Yeah, I can't help but feel my assumption from that was that her family are now gone, so it won't fix that.
Do you think? Because she does say, I'm not going back until I can make them human again. I'll do pretty much anything.
Okay.
I thought I'll do pretty much anything felt very laboured as well.
So did you have a theory at the time? When watching it for the first time?
I couldn't quite figure it out. I was still suspicious of her because of the bush thing. I was convinced that she had ulterior motives, and I couldn't quite piece together I felt like I had all the right pieces, but I couldn't. When you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, you have to turn them. They have to be facing the right way. Obviously, they have to be turned the right way. The sides only connect in certain ways. I felt like I had all the pieces, but I hadn't turned them in the right to the right number of degrees to make them fit into each other. So I was just sort of sat holding pieces that I was so sure would make sense together, but I couldn't quite figure out what the exact chain of events was. But I was suspicious of her.
You watched it all in one go, didn't you? So
I think it was either one or two goes. Yeah, I think we pretty much sat down and blasted through it. I can't remember if we did it over 2 nights or one, but yeah, we pretty much binged it. Yeah. I found that. I guess the problem was that I didn't have a huge amount of time to really sit and analyze it. I mean, do you have any theories? Is anything occurring to you as to what's going on with Beatrice? Because there's something very leading about the buts and the was, and then the I'll do pretty much anything, to make them human again. Like that. The emphasis on those things is that cannot be coincidental. That feels very deliberate.
No, yeah, my only theory was what I said. I was like, oh, maybe her family are already a lost cause. It's the one... I'm so set on the purgatory thing for everything else, but whether purgatory affects different people in different ways, and it's affected her in this way and turned her into a bird, but it's exactly what you've described. I've got some squares and I'm trying to fit them into an orange hole, and I'm missing the sides that turn it into a circle, not orange, Jesus, into a circle.
Yeah, I see exactly what you mean. Yeah, exactly.
It's really tricky. It is the one element. I trust the character though, personally.
No.
I can say I'm different on that.
Well, what was interesting about it was this episode gave me the sense that whatever she was up to, she was conflicted about it because of the use of that was the plan.
Right, okay.
So I thought maybe she didn't have the most noble intentions initially.
What, she was going to sacrifice them?
I didn't know. That's the problem, is I genuinely... I didn't have any specific theory. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. Like a like fucking like she was gonna feed him to a monster or something. I don't know what the plan was. Maybe she was working with the beast.
Swap them for her family or something.
Yeah, I mean, something like that makes a certain amount of sense. So I was kind of watching it, like going like, but the use of the word "was" there caught my attention when I watched it the first time. I remember thinking that was the plan is a weird way to phrase that. Like, you know, and she says it twice too, so it really stuck out. Because I think if she just said it once, it might have slipped by. But I remember very distinctly that on my first watch of the show, feeling that way about that line. I mean, go on, sorry.
What did you? This is off Beatrice though. But were you surprised that Steve left in this episode?
Oh, the horse.
Yeah,
is his name Steve? I thought it was like Fred.
Oh, Fred, sorry.
Fred the horse.
I thought it was
Fred the horse. Because I think he might... I have a feeling... I haven't double-checked this, but I thought he was voiced by Fred Armisen, maybe. So I thought that might be funny why he was called Fred, but I could be wrong on that. I haven't actually looked up who voices Fred the horse.
Was he definitely called Fred? I could have sworn he was called Steve.
Fred the horse, over the garden wall. No, he's called Fred. I found his little wiki page. I thought that was fine. Because, look, he was never going to be a proper character, and... they did all the jokes they were ever going to do with him.
Well, I expected them to... I was almost quite surprised by how fleshed out they made his character in this, that when he then left, I was like, oh, okay. Because I think he could have been a character if he just didn't... like, he was almost like the Silent Bob of horses. So he'd just occasionally...
Yeah.
He'd be like... He'd say something, you know, sensical and really valuable, but most of the time he just didn't and would occasionally sarcastically quip. But when they gave him like more of a character and he was like worried about going with the guy with John Cleese's character and he was desperate to find the money and stuff, it was like, oh, they've really given him a defined character, which I think was almost too sidekicky and too comical for where we're potentially going. So it makes sense. Like, as soon as they started doing that, when he then went, it didn't surprise me.
Yeah. I just loved that when they were like, when he was just like, Fred's a talking horse. He can do whatever he wants. I want to steal. Like, that line, like,
yeah,
that line got me absolutely. Because that's another thing we haven't talked about. There's a really there's a really kind of light but fun conversation early in the episode where Wirt is judging Beatrice, I keep calling her Beatrice and Fred's, like, just eagerness to we'll just steal from this mega rich dude. And then, like, I love that Wirt gets on board when he realizes all they need is 2 cents or 2 pennies. Like, he's just like, yeah, I guess he's like, that's nothing for this
very
guy.
Funny.
It's a great idea. And like, but yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's, for me, there's only a couple of jokes you can do with that character. Like, the first joke is you think he's not a talking horse, then he's a talking horse, and that's kind of funny. And he's just chill about everything. And then the other one is he's just like, yeah, I'm out for myself. I want to steal. Let me steal stuff. Like, I think that's kind of funny too. And I'm just like, I don't know what you do with him otherwise now. Like, he's clearly not linked to the main plot in any major way. Not like, not in the way that Beatrice seems to be.
He certainly didn't have the similar motivations or character depth that they've given her.
Exactly. So to me, it was like, it makes perfect sense not to drag him along. We need to focus the story a bit more now from this point on. You know, we're getting towards the end, as you've pointed out, and I think dragging him along would kind of not be the most helpful. I guess you could kind of not really, but you could kind of do what they did in this episode, which is he's just present, like the frog. You know, he's not actually part of the story. So I suppose they could have kept him, and it wouldn't have caused too much trouble. But I liked that he found his place in the world. He can transport tea for John Cleese's character. Worked well for me as a gag. I thought something interesting about this though when I was watching it. It was my memory was initially before this episode was just thinking like, oh, this is just a world where animals talk, and then there was that episode where Schooltown Follies, where they were trying to teach the animals to talk, and it wasn't working very well, was it? None of them were talking.
No.
And then the only other talking animal we've come across since has been Fred. So if Beatrice is a talking bird and she was cursed, could you argue the only other talking animal we've come across, to my knowledge, unless I'm misremembering, someone please correct me, is Fred? Do you think maybe Fred's under some sort of curse also?
Yeah, he was a thief in real life, but he's all right with purgatory as a horse. He's not bothered.
Yeah. There's something kind of ironic.
I tell you what, can you imagine if it's not purgatory? I'm gonna be. I'm like, I don't even talk about it like it's a theory anymore.
Keep in mind, Chris, that I already know whether it is or isn't.
I'm gonna look like such a dick if it isn't. But all like you say, so many references to death this, and
I mean that's again as well though, assuming that the ending is a like a mystery box open moment of, and it's this wink, like you don't even necessarily know for sure how they go about approaching explaining this.
All the hype and all the stuff you said before this was definitely a thing. I can't imagine a world if it's just entertaining and didn't go deeper than that, we wouldn't be doing this. So it's slightly unfair to factor that in, but that is the truth.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. But you remember what we said about Lost? I think this is really important. Is when we talked about Lost, we sort of said it doesn't really. In the end, the character stuff in the finale was really, really effective. And it was the only problem was not so much that they didn't answer all the questions, it was that they left most of the questions unanswerable with contradictory information. So you could build a theory, but then your theory would get shot down by some other weird thing that happened in the show's 6-7 season run. But I think we all acknowledge that because the character ending was so strong, like, getting definitive answers to everything wasn't really the focus at that point by the ending. So do you not feel like here might be a similar situation for you, like where you can get reasonable answers, like a leading explanation that lets you put it together yourself with a little bit of legwork, but no actual moment where Wirt stumbles across a book, opens it, and the first page is "You're in purgatory." Do you know what I mean? Like, how clear cut do you need your ending to be? Is what I'm sort of saying. Because
I need the answers to not contradict.
Exactly,
and I think 10 episodes, decent writers, lots of love. I suspect the answers won't contradict. Because, again, I don't know if the show would be recommended. I don't know if you'd put me through exactly the same experience of Lost. I think you'd know I'd be angry. Because as much as Lost was gripping, groundbreaking. The season 3 finale is still one of my favourite moments of television ever. It was a brilliant, amazing, exhilarating show to watch. Mm-hmm. Bearing in mind that I describe it that way, would I recommend someone sits down and watch Lost? Probably not.
Because the overall experience is not that satisfying.
But you don't get the reward. It's not satisfying.
But what we've just established is it's about it not contradicting, not about actually getting it spelled out. So what I'm saying here is...
I don't need all the answers spelled out on a plate.
Exactly.
I need the answers.
I'm tempering that expectation now because I think the information. And this is my honest opinion on future episodes. I don't think I'm spoiling Chris here. Like, sorry, but I feel like they give us enough information to dissect and explore and put it together with. But I don't think it's that there isn't a moment when it's like, oh, it's this definitively exactly. With he opens the book and
but
it says,
and my response to that is I don't need it. I don't need it to be definitive. I just need it not to contradict.
Yeah, but because you keep going back to your very specific theory that to explain it that way would be very definitive. I'm trying to make sure that you're sort of tempering it so you don't, because I was trying to make sure that you're not like expecting that click moment of it's this. Does that make sense?
No. I almost wanted to just say that to acknowledge that I am still aware it's just a theory, but I'm just really convinced, and that's why I reference it so flippantly. I'd love to know, going back to the, I know it's not too relevant for this podcast, but we don't like doing that thing where we're like, comment below, but genuinely, I'm intrigued. Comment below, people that have seen Lost, would you recommend it?
Yeah, even with having enjoyed even the bulk of it, knowing that ending is problematic in that by the time the show ended, they'd set up so many mysteries. Not only could they not adequately explain them all, but the answers they did give would contradict each other, and the whole thing just started to fall apart a bit.
When I think about like TV watching experiences,
Yeah.
Lost was one of the best. Lost was one of the most thrilling. I have emotional memories connected to the show. It's a full-on, it's up there with The Office and Only Fools and Horses with me. It is mental to me that I still fundamentally wouldn't recommend anyone else sits through it.
Exactly. So yeah, comments below for those of you who've seen Lost.
Would you recommend it?
No. Because I think I fundamentally now disagree with with J.J. Abrams on mystery box storytelling. I've very much outgrown it. It was a cheap trick that gained ratings, and it was.
I'm not sure it's all JJ's fault. I kind of get the feeling some of his stuff he had answers for.
Except for the fact that the whole style of writing. This whole set up a huge mystery and just keep asking the questions, and that is exactly the subject of his TED Talk. He loves the mystery box. It's his whole storytelling philosophy, and he even baked it into Star Wars when they gave it him. Ooh, who could Rey's parents be? Ooh, who's Snoke? Mystery boxes are like, he loves them. He just loves them. So there's no way that and if you've watched the creators of that show's other shows, the other creators, the non-JJ Abrams people who worked on that show, and let's be honest, they probably had more influence on it in the end than he did. But they were working off his blueprint and I think he's having been involved in the early seasons of the show, they followed the mystery box blueprint onwards. But you look at this has suddenly become a Lost podcast. I don't know when that happened, but when you look at
but it happened around the half an hour mark when we ran out of things to say about Over the Garden Wall this episode.
There's one more element I want to talk to you about this week's episode. We'll get to that in a second quickly. But I'll very quickly wrap up this point and get us back on track, I promise. I think it's interesting because the other two writers from Lost, when they went on to create their own things, like particularly Lindelof went and worked on and created the Leftovers, which was a wonderful show that did have mysteries in it, but they didn't play out in the J.J. Abrams mystery box format. It wasn't really. They were never the focal point of the storytelling. They were sort of slower burn, subtler, less direct questions, more just elements of the world you pondered, and you were like, maybe the answers will come to me. Like, maybe the answer it's about. I think it's the difference between like organic, I'm wondering about that, and the show going, this is the question, this thing here, that's what you should be asking. Does that make sense? That's the difference.
Yeah.
I came out of Star Wars the Force Awakens thinking the two questions I had were, who is Rey's parents? Very specifically, who are Rey's parents and who is Snoke? Whereas I, watched the first season of Leftovers.
It's funny because I would argue the script doesn't actually do. A character doesn't. Han Solo doesn't turn to Rey and go, "Hey, who are your parents again?"
He literally does. He goes, "Who are you anyway?"
Okay.
He turns to her at all point and is like, and then when she indicates she has the Force, that question comes up again. There's like 2 or 3 moments, and Snoke, Snoke was subtler, I think. But it definitely was led that way. But I think with the Leftovers, it was just like I was just like curious about the world, so I pondered it, and I had multiple questions that evolved naturally from what I was exploring. I think there's this weird subtle difference, and I think with this show, the mysteries are sort of again a bit like with the Leftover, where it's like it's not so much the show is going, "Don't you want to know about this?" The show is going, "Well, here's what you've seen of the world through the eyes of these two people moving through it." You will naturally start to go, well, what does this mean? And what's this piece? And what's that person's backstory?
Do you think the last scene of the last episode sort of breaks that rule? Because it's kind of the first time in a way that we're seeing something not through the eyes of Wirt and Bert.
Wirt and Bert. Wait, what's the last shot of this episode?
No, last week, the woodsman thing.
Sure. Yeah, no, but I mean, I suppose eventually you've got to answer those questions, and if you're not ready for the characters to know it, but you want the audience to, I suppose that's, a show this early, with this shorter run, you've not established a very distinct rule. Like Steven Universe at this point, if in the first 10 episodes, Steven Universe has done an episode not with Steven's perspective, then you've created an exception that you can occasionally jump to, in future. But they've now done 100 50 episodes where Stephen's perspective has been the rule. You've never gone away. You've never seen a scene that doesn't include Stephen. It's that simple. And
we've never even seen anyone tell him a story where he doesn't picture it slightly different, apart from like the new Crystal Gems is like the rare exception for that.
Exactly. So whereas this show is quite early in its run, and while we are mostly getting the story of these two kids through their perspective, there's not a hard and fast enough rule been established for us to not get away with cutting away occasionally. So I was kind of okay with that choice to get us a little bit of extra information, just to give us a little nudge up on what the kids know. I thought that was fine. I thought they got away with that.
Mm-hmm.
The last question, the last thing I wanted to talk to you about from this episode specifically, was Wirt. So Wirt has a secret too, and it's right up your street. It's that he has a crush. Well, what did you think to that, and his, like, first of all, keeping it, like, treating it like it's too huge a secret to tell to start with. Like, everything from his perspective on it is yeah. Well, I just want you to generally talk about what you think on that.
I think it absolutely led to them being in the situation they were in somehow. So
right,
he, if it's purgatory, he was insisting they went to see her and there was an accident, or she turned out to be a murderer and she killed them. I think that the fact that he views it as a big secret, its earlier references, like in the kind of slightly hazy stuff surrounding it and the broken-hearted stuff in the first episode, I think that it has to be important, and the only way I can think that it's important and linked is if that directly caused the situation they're in.
I think that makes sense. I think I found what I found most interesting about this is it just reminded me how much of a child he is.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. It's such a
really characterizes
such a big thing when you're young to like have a crush, and you tend to like. I had a crush. I fancied the same girl from I'm not kidding you, year 1 to year 8.
Oh wow.
Yeah, fun fact. Married one of my best friends. I gave a speech at their wedding. But yeah, I absolutely that she was that
like was that speech delivered through tears?
Yeah. I wept. No, I set them up. I was, it was very much a childhood crush and fancied, and they both parties know that. Made her cry actually in year 3 because we were doing that thing where you paint on one side of the paper and then you fold the paper over and then you unfold the paper and it creates like a matching butterfly because obviously the paint goes over both sides.
Sure.
And I told someone that I liked her and they went round. So year 3 for context, what is that?
Young.
5?
Yeah, it's very young.
5-ish. Let's say, yeah.
It's got to be a little bit older than 5, hasn't it? You go into
if you're 11 in year 7, then you're right. You're talking -4 to that. Yeah, so you're talking 6. Yeah,
7, 6 or 7. Yeah.
6, 7. And someone else in the class, I won't name him, Mark, went round and whispered in everybody's ear, Chris fancies Katie. He full named us both even. And then she got so fed up of people coming up and telling her it that she burst into tears. And then got taken to the front, and the teacher, it was a cover teacher, I won't name her, Lewis, and she was going, it's just gossip. This is gossip. It's wrong. People shouldn't gossip because people get upset, and directed the whole thing angrily at me. And I'm like, I'm not responsible for this. I don't know why I'm taking the hit here. And she then didn't speak to me for weeks until one morning she came up behind me, put her hands over my eyes and said, guess who?
And you were like,
so my point is,
the love of my life.
You really remember your childhood crushes.
Yeah, you do. You're not wrong. So, to bring that round, I think they very realistically portrayed Wirt's response here because it's been easy to forget how young he is because he's always compared, of course, to Greg, who is the ultimate innocence. I mean, he is portrayed in the show as just innocence personified. Like, he's just like, oblivious and happy, and like, he's very much unsullied by the world. And in a lot of ways, sometimes Wirt's protecting him from that, but that can create this impression that Wirt is much older than he is, I think. So when you have moments like this, you go, oh God, they are literally children. It's so heartbreaking.
It's very, very real.
Yeah, so this idea that to him, Beatrice's secret is that she literally got her whole family turned into bluebirds, and his secret is he's got a crush. And when she reacts to that, he doesn't act like, yeah, you're right, these two things don't compare. He's like, no, seriously. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's really...
I'll tell you what's interesting. Beatrice reacts to him with quite a lot of emotional intelligence, where she's like, this isn't a big deal, don't worry about it. Suggesting that she's old enough to know that you shouldn't chuck rocks at a bird.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Which is interesting. No, I'm serious. Like, that's a general interesting... Unless she's aged in the world. So she threw the rock.
She's aged. You think she's aged as a bird?
I think the action she's describing and her general demeanour, the action is of a child, and her general demeanour now is of someone who's grown and developed and matured.
I do not think you're wrong. I think that is a very astute observation.
That's of note.
Yeah. Would you want me to quickly read you the exchange so you can get it confirmed?
If you like, why not?
It's weird to admit it, but, well, I have this crush on this girl. That's all. That's all. And I think her about a lot, and I play the clarinet. What? You gotta be kidding me. And I secretly whisper poetry to myself in my room at night. Well, that stuff's not weird. Those are just, well, the poetry thing is a bit weird, but those are just character traits. So yeah, so she's very much being very comforting and that is a very apt way to handle a child and just say, no, don't feel like you're being weird. That's absolutely normal. You're right. That's a very grown-up thing to do.
Yeah. So two theories. One, the one I've just outlined. She threw the rock at the bird as a child and has been in this situation she's in now for quite a long time and had the ability to mature. Or number two, she threw the rock as a 19-year-old and is just a bit of a bitch.
Oh, I really thought your second one there was going to be that the story doesn't match, and I'm suspicious of her now.
Oh, no.
I really thought that was your other option. I was like, those are the two options, surely.
No, I think one day we're going to see Ricky Gervais tweeting, like, don't throw rocks at birds, this is what happens.
Yeah, he's got a picture of Beatrice.
That sounded like I was criticising
Ricky
Fred Gervais. I think his animal rights work is fantastic. There wasn't a criticism at all.
So there you go. So I think we've thoroughly covered Mad Love.
Man.
Overall thoughts, though, I think positive. I think it's probably one of the funnier episodes.
Yeah, decent romp at the midway point.
Yeah, I enjoy it very much. I think it's funny. I think it's engaging. I like the characters a lot. I think John Cleese is a great guest cast.
He's brilliant
person to have. I think they did a good job on this one. I think it's I don't think it's like I agree that it's not that spooky scary considering how creepy and weird the pumpkins felt. This does feel like they've
even episode 1 as well had some fairly creepy stuff.
Yeah, the monster in that episode is pretty creepy until you realize it's just a polite happy dog that accidentally ate a toe on a tree that Woodsman's chopping down to keep a lantern to keep essentially some sort of facsimile for the devil at bay. It's all very complicated, Chris. Anyway, little links though. That's one thing I will give this show credit for as well. Everything feels organically interlinked. It never feels like they're forcing those links, does it? It always feels like it always fits nicely, even if I don't have all the pieces at this stage. Great. So the picture is starting to emerge. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. We're very excited to keep doing this. And Chris particularly just wants to get to the fucking end at this point, doesn't he?
In a good way, though.
Yeah, of course. I think that's pretty much covered us. So feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Get us over that 1,000 subscriber mark. Last I checked, we were 990 something. It'd be nice to be remonetized for about 5 minutes until YouTube move the goalpost again. Make it 1,500 subscribers needed to be monetized.
Given given that the EU passed that copyright bill today, I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of YouTube changes coming up.
Yeah, we've got problems. Anyway, they also passed a bill to they passed another bill to end daylight savings time.
What?
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean then?
By 2021.
It's going to be the same time all year round.
Yeah, the clock never goes forward or back an hour.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
That'd be
just
strange.
Well, that's how it should be. They only ever changed that to give farmers more daylight in the mornings to do their work.
Oh, really? That makes it... Wow. Yeah, but it just seems... I know that doesn't actually change much, but it just feels big, you know?
No. But
there's always that fun thing of, like, an extra hour in bed. But
then there's the other side of that, which is nasty as shit, which is when you lose an hour of sleep to the gods of time going back. It's ridiculous. Or forward, whichever one it is, forward. I hate it. Can't wait to get rid of it. It's pointless.
So when does that come into effect?
2021, I think they said. We'll be out of Europe by then, Chris. Don't worry. We'll still be stuck with it. Brexit talk with Dan and Chris. We're all fucked.
Yeah, it's just we're also because maybe that whole thing might be clearer by the time this airs, but we're also very much in the middle of Brexit madness at the point we're recording this as well.
Yeah, we don't know what's going on. Literally shrug.
We don't know what's happening.
I went to a big conference at work today, and so one of the questions for the all the managing directors and all the top people at the company I work for, and I work for quite a large company. One of the questions that was asked to them was, "Is there a plan in place for Brexit?" You know, because it'll affect all business. You know, and they were like, "I mean, there would be if we had any idea what was about to happen." They were like, we have basic contingencies in place for no deal, but everything else is just so question marks over it that we really don't know what the option, what the move's going to be in terms of how we move our business forward in a Brexit world. But
it's crazy, and I hope as I say this, if anyone is paying attention to politics or whatever, I hope as I say this that someone thinks, "Don't worry, that didn't happen." But what's crazy is, it feels like the one thing most people are agreed on is that no deal would be a disaster. Yet we still seem to be going further and further towards no deal.
It's tragic, isn't it? Anyway, we should move on. This is weirder than our Only Fools Nurses, our Faulty Towers tangent from last week where we played.
Oh yeah, that reminds me. Right, okay, so I'm thinking of a sitcom. I'm thinking of a sitcom actor who is famous for two comedies. Really, but two comedy characters and a few other characters. Nope.
Ronnie Baker.
Yeah. Nope.
Okay, carry on.
No, will you give it? So,
you're not
one of the comedies that. Well, okay, one of the comedies they were famous for was in the 80s, and the other comedy was sporadically, and I mean that term very much, sporadically
David
in the
Jason?
90s. Nope.
I'm close though, aren't I? Because I think it's what's his face played Rodney.
No.
What's his name?
I would argue
Nicholas Lyndhurst.
I would argue while neither of the comedies is bigger than Only Fools and Horses, I would argue that the two comedies are both more famous than Goodnight Sweetheart. And certainly, American listeners would also know who this person is.
Oh God, well, I love that we've just decided that we're ending this show on.
Oh, we said we would. We said at the end of last week I'd think of a sitcom actor.
Okay. I don't. Okay. I'm wondering. I'm wondering if Red Dwarf is the right direction.
No, again, two bigger comedies than Red Dwarf and The British Empire.
That's thrown me a little bit. Is one of the comedies, because you said sporadically, was one of them like Fry and Laurie? Are we talking a sketch show or are we talking a sitcom?
We're talking technically a sitcom, but when I say sporadically, I don't just mean the seasons were sporadic. I mean the episodes were sporadic. In fact, it didn't have seasons.
What show can I think of didn't have seasons?
It was a comedy that just had... So there were two... One is a sitcom, which had 4 seasons, and loosely a movie, but that term is very loose.
Dad's Army?
Other... Nope. But there's an element of Dad's Army that puts you in the right ballpark.
Oh, Jesus.
The other
I'm
is a
never gonna
comedy... You should get it. The other is a comedy that had 13 episodes, spread out across a number of years. Huge internationally.
Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson, Blackadder.
Yep.
Got
correct.
it. Boom.
There you go.
Yeah,
Boom.
the big clue there was internationally.
Yeah.
Because, of course, Mr. Bean, not being a comedy that uses many words, was huge everywhere because it translated without being translated.
Yeah.
No.
They didn't need to spend money translating.
It was funny to every culture because it was all visual comedy. It didn't rely on language or wordplay that would only work in the original language like a lot of other sitcoms did. It's very clever.
I'd be surprised in a way if any, with the exception, I suppose, with the exception of the big American sitcoms towards the
Rowan
end,
Atkinson.
like huh?
No, I was just literally commenting. That was more for myself than anyone else. Just a good old Rowan Atkinson. Sorry, that was just me fondly thinking of Rowan Atkinson.
With the exception maybe of the big American comedies like Big Bang and Friends, where they're earning like 1.8 million an episode. Considering there were only 13 episodes, it's probably got to be the most money made or one of the highest earning shows per episode.
Yeah, I don't know what they were
maybe.
paying him back in the day for Mr. Bean. And I don't know what you mean by sort of movie. There was a movie. There were 2 movies.
No. I was talking about Blackadder then, and the special that aired in the Millennium Dome that was movie length roughly.
Yeah, that was Back and
not
Forth,
really
right?
A movie. Yeah.
I thought Back and Forth was fine, by the way. I know everyone shat on that, but I thought it was like.
I really liked it. I think sort of movie is a fair description of it.
Yeah, we are so off base here. This is ridiculous. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. Sorry to put you through yet another weird British specific tangent at the end of our otherwise quite strictly over the garden wall discussion. I think, except for a lost tangent
apart from
the
the 10-minute
tangent
on
we
Lost.
are the worst. We are bad at this. We are bad podcasters. On that revelation,
Fine. I think we talked about Over the Garden Wall as much as we have in other episodes.
Yeah,
There's just also some Lost and a little game at the end.
Feel free to send your complaints to Chris Billingham. No,
Fine. Let us know if you'd recommend Lost below, and let us know if you got Rowan Atkinson before Dan did.
Yep, you probably did. Tweet at us your ire at nothing but static without the G, or at Dan Doolan or at C Billingham with 2 M's. You can join the Discord if you ask for an invite from me, or if you go on our Patreon page, where, guess what? Go there pretty much right now, and you'll have access to the next episode of this. Boom. Look at that. Well ahead of the game. But thank you very much for listening. We appreciate it. Anyone who's stuck with us till episode 59 of this shambles is a hero, a true hero. So thanks very much for listening. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
Come back next time when we once again overanalyze the garden wall.